What does an oil platform standing 500 feet taller than the Empire State Building and a space telescope that weighs as much as 2 African elephants have in common? They're a pain to transport. From the giant airplane that cost upwards of $30,000 an hour to the $1 million mission to safely move whales across the planet, these transport operations are some of the hardest and most expensive in the world. Let's break down just how much work goes into these costly moves. And stick around until the end to find out about the massive ship transporting 8,500 vehicles across the sea. Deep in the Gulf of Mexico, there sits a giant oil platform called Bullwinkle. The platform was first installed in 1988 and was the tallest structure ever built at the time of its construction. With a total height of 1,736 feet or 529 meters, the structure stands 500 feet taller than the Empire State Building. That's not the only comparison we can make to a famous building. It took 5 years to construct the 77,000-ton platform, using more than 10 times the amount of steel used to build the Eiffel Tower. But just how did they get this gigantic oil rig out in the water? It took 3.5 days of traveling from the shore to the designated area with a posse of the toughest tugboats. And once there, the platform had to be carefully tipped into the water to get the correct placement. Once settled, the platform was designed to resist hurricane-force winds and 70-foot waves. All in all, building and transporting this gigantic platform cost $500 million. But it seems worth it, since the Bullwinkle can produce 59,000 barrels of oil per day. Transporting a platform into the middle of the water seems hard. But how about sending a rocket to space? Space travel is incredibly expensive, but thanks to Elon Musk, space travel is slowly getting cheaper. Elon Musk's SpaceX has sent the Falcon 9 rocket blasting off into outer space. What's so unique about the Falcon 9 is that it's reusable, which drastically cuts the cost of space transport. The rocket can transport people and payloads up to 4,020 kilograms or 8,860 pounds all the way to Mars. And when you consider that the rocket itself weighs over 500,000 kilograms, then the amount of transport that the Falcon 9 is capable of is even more impressive. The cost of launching the Falcon 9 is estimated at about $62 million per launch, plus $2.5 million in insurance. The Air Force awarded a budget of $95 million per launch to the project, but reusing the rockets can bring the cost down to less than $30 million per launch. If Elon can continue cutting the cost of launching a spacecraft, commercial space travel might not be so far out of our reach after all. Another spectacular platform out in the middle of the water is the Troll A natural gas platform. Just off the coast of Norway, this platform is held up by concrete pillars called caissons. A caisson is basically just a concrete cup turned upside down, creating a dry workspace on the bottom, all the way on the seabed, 303 meters or 995 feet below the water's surface. At 1.2 million tons and 1,548 feet, or 427 meters tall, the Troll A platform is the heaviest object ever moved by man. It took 10 tugboats to move the platform 174 miles into the North Sea back in 1996. The inside of the huge caissons are outfitted with everything from cozy living quarters to an elevator to get workers quickly up and down the giant concrete pillars. But if you think that the workers think a 9-minute elevator ride from the sea to the operational platform is long, then the 100 days it took to pour the concrete to form each leg must have felt like an eternity. The entire cost of building and transporting this engineering marvel was approximately $650 million back in 1991. But the engineers earned a few accolades for their hard work, including a Guinness World Record in 1996 for the largest offshore gas platform. When UPS offered their services to the new Georgia Aquarium in 2005, they had no idea that they'd be asked to transport 4 whale sharks from Taipei and 2 beluga whales from Mexico all the way to Atlanta. The transportation team started with the whale sharks. They loaded them into a Lockheed C-130 at the beach and then flew them to Taiwan's International Airport, where they then loaded them onto a 747. Each whale shark was about 16 feet long, weighed 2,000 pounds, and required 2 custom-built tanks on board the flight. With the added water weight, the load exceeded 50,000 pounds. The trip for the 2 belugas was even more difficult since those animals were in the middle of an amusement park. They had to use a crane on the park's railroad track to carefully lift them from their tank. But once they were out of the water, they were safely transported to Atlanta with no other issues. But just how much does it cost to move giant living creatures? Well, just starting the 747 costs $20,000. Plus, the flight to get the whale sharks from Taipei to Atlanta was about $340,000. When you consider the mechanics and the teamwork involved, the total comes out to about $1 million per trip. But since UPS donated their time and money to the cause, the whales and whale sharks got themselves a free luxury flight. How do you transport a 50-foot wide superconducting electromagnet when it's needed elsewhere? Well, it's complicated. The Muon G-2 magnet used to be in New York State, but after realizing they needed to conduct experiments with it elsewhere, this magnet went on a long journey. They carefully transported it 3,200 miles over land and sea to its new home at the U.S. Department of Energy's laboratory, where it was going to be used to try and discover new particles. To get it to its new research destination, the magnet took a barge south around Florida and was then driven on a specifically designed truck over 3 long nights before it reached its final destination. On the journey, it amassed crowds of fans who had never before seen something this big, let alone a magnet, on the move. All in all, the massive magnet cost $25 million to build and another $3 million to transport. But if they would have simply built a new magnet instead of transporting the old one, that would have cost them 10 times more. It's the size of 2 fully grown African elephants, and its destination is space. That's right, it's the Hubble telescope, one of the most costly transport operations in the world. That explains why it took 2 years of negotiation for NASA to finally get congressional approval to develop and transport the telescope back in 1977. But with setbacks galore, the Hubble telescope only left Earth in April of 1990 on board the Space Shuttle Discovery. But the problems would just keep coming. After photos taken by the telescope turned out to be unusable, NASA sent a crew of 7 in 1993 to fix it over 5 days of spacewalks. Then the 43.5 feet, 24,500-pound telescope was finally able to do its job and send gorgeous pictures of the galaxy back to Earth. So how much did the development and transport of the first spacebound telescope cost? A cool $1.5 billion and about 5 servicing missions after its first launch. But when you look at these gorgeous images, you can't help but think that the telescope was totally worth the trouble. Let's move on from space to the sea. The HMM Algeciras is the biggest container ship in the world. At 400 meters long, 60 meters wide, and 70 meters high, it's the very first 24,000 TEU ship, with TEU standing for 20-foot equivalent units. This means the ship can carry 24,000 different 20-foot-long containers. The ship comes complete with scrubbers to help decrease its impact on the environment. And like the other ships created by the Korean company HMM, the ship can service about 73 ports. Well, if it can fit. Port congestion is a real problem for massive container carriers, so let's hope the Algeciras can squeeze its way into ports all around the world. Considering this massive transport ship cost about $140 million plus operation costs, HMM is hoping to see it travel the world as much as possible. Speaking of traveling the world, did you know that the iconic Statue of Liberty wasn't even made by Americans? Nope, the Green Lady is actually a French creation, which means that it had to travel all the way from France to New York City. In 1885, the 450,000-pound statue finally arrived in New York Harbor after traveling across the Atlantic Ocean in 350 individual pieces. There were more than 200 cases to unpack once the statue arrived. Engineer Gustav Eiffel, yes, the same one who worked on the Eiffel Tower, was partially responsible for the project that would become a symbol of the American dream. After a long assembly process, the statue was finally honored and officially opened the following year. The Statue of Liberty cost the French about $5.5 million in today's dollars to make. Tack on an extra million or so for transportation, and you've got one expensive statue. The world's biggest plane, on the other hand, is worth a whole lot more than a statue. The AN-225 was created by the Soviet Union and originally meant to transport Soviet spacecrafts. The goal was to launch spacecrafts right off the plane, because once they reach 6.5 miles of altitude, about 90% of the launch energy is saved. The giant plane weighs around 285,000 kilograms when empty and measures about 84 meters long. It has a wingspan of 88.4 meters and can carry a massive payload of 250,000 kilograms. It's perfect for carrying jumbo spaceships high into the air. Unfortunately, the AN-225 isn't doing anything that interesting. The spacecraft project was canceled. While the AN-225 cost about $460 million to develop, it now costs $30,000 to use it for 1 hour. It could make a pretty penny on long-distance travel, but sadly, it doesn't have many takers. What's better than a giant aircraft with no cargo? A giant ship that's meant to do nothing but transport cargo. Specifically, the Hoeg target is meant to transport vehicles across the world. The 36-meter-long vessel is capable of transporting 8,500 cars per trip. It's the biggest car and truck carrier in the entire world, with a deck space of 71,400 square meters. Cargo up to 6.5 meters high and 12 meters wide can be loaded safely onto the jumbo vessel, and the profit made from transporting all of these cars can be just as gigantic. With 8,500 vehicles that can range from $1,000 to $5,000 each in transportation costs, the Hoeg Target can make about $8.5 to $42.5 million per trip. Considering that the company, Hoeg Autoliners, operates 15 trade routes in global trade markets and makes about 3,000 port calls a year, having a jumbo cargo ship seems to be a lot more profitable than having a giant cargo plane. Which of these epic transportation operations impressed you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to The Richest for more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.